Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Sotah, Parak Beis, Chapter 2, Mishna Aleph, Mishna 1. Okay, so we're going back now to the, to what was done to this woman as she was brought to the Beis Hamikdash to drink the Meimarim, the bitter water. So Yamevi es ben chasa b'ser chvifa mitzris. So a Sotah brings a mincha offering. That's part of the process what she does. I mean, actually, the husband brings this mincha offering, and it was put in what's called a kfifa mitzris. Kfifa mitzvah means a basket made of palm fiber. Palm fiber is the soft fiber that grows around a palm tree. Okay, and this is what the basket was made out of. Clearly, it is not a very nice or expensive basket. It's made out of something very, very inexpensive. This is what was brought in. The Mishna al yodea kadei liyaga, and he would put it, and they would put it on her hands to hold until it was ready to be offered, for the purposes of tiring her out. Again, tiring her out was a way of trying to get her to admit, in case she was guilty, to admit that she was wrong. By doing so, she prevents the name of Hashem from being erased into the water, because at this point, they come to this is before the writing of the it is before the name of Hashem. Part of the process was, as the Torah tells us, that the whole Torah portion of this law of the Sotah is written on a parchment, which includes Hashem's name. It's erased into water, which means Hashem's name is erased. And therefore, if we can get her to admit her guilt and to prevent that from happening and to prevent her from losing her life, we're trying to do that. So, before the Mishnah mentioned what's done to get her to admit, and now at this point, we're doing another thing to get her to admit, and that is to have her hold it up to the point that it's going to be then offered the way it's until the point that it's offered. Okay. Now the Mishnah says, Kol hamenachos, all meal offerings. Tchilasan v'seifim v'kli shares. They start off and they end in a kli shares. Kli shares literally means a service vessel. A service vessel means a sacred vessel that is used in the sacrificial service in the Beis Hamikdash. In certain circumstances, it sanctifies what is placed into it. All mincha offerings must be sanctified in a service vessel before they can be offered. So the use of a kli shares by a typical mincha is at the point before the mincha is going to be offered. The mincha is put into the kli shares, a service vessel. That's what sanctifies it. Now here the Mishnah reads. Let's just read it a little bit further. All menachos, they start off and they end off in a service vessel. That means a consecrated, a vessel sacred that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. V'zoi, and this one, meaning regarding the Sotah, this mincha, tchilasa b'kfifa mitzris, it starts off in the palm fiber basket, v'seifa b'kli shares, and it ends up in a service vessel. So we're trying to make a distinction, right? We're trying to show the difference between, the mincha that this Sotah brings and what's typically done by a mincha. And there's going to be a number of differences, but the first difference that is mentioned is that by all menachos, they start off in a service vessel and they end in a service vessel. Now, what does it mean they start off in a service vessel? I mean, starting off here means how it's brought. The owner brings the flour that's used for the mincha. He brings it to the Beis Hamikdash. So every person who brings the flour to the Beis Hamikdash brings it in a vessel that's sacred to that sacred object to the Beis Hamikdash. That's not true. So let me read to you here from the bottom. Actually, the owner of a mincha, meaning typical, does not bring it to the Beis Hamikdash in a service temple. It's not what typically happens. You probably don't want it to happen that way. You want it to become sanctified, shortly before it's going to be offered. So what does the Mishna mean? The Mishna means that he brings it in something that is fit to be used as a service vessel. For example, a basket of gold or silver. That would be the very respectful way, a very honorable way of bringing the mincha. Okay. Now, and therefore it's brought in a gold vessel, a silver vessel. These are all made of materials that could be sanctified as a service vessel. And after the mincha is brought into the Beis Hamikdash courtyard, it is transferred into a consecrated service vessel. But you bring it in a nice unconsecrated vessel, and then when you get to the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, you transfer it into a kli sharis, a service vessel that consecrates it for the mincha. But the point here is, the distinction being made here is that by all other menachas, by all other meal offerings, what happens is that you have it starting off in something that could be a service vessel kli sharis, and eventually it ends up in a kli sharis, while by the Sotah, it does not start in something that could be a service vessel, because a basket made out of palm fiber could never be sanctified to be offered, to be sanctified as a service vessel, because would you use that, as the Gemara says, would you use that as in the service of a non-Jewish governor, a non-Jewish official? You wouldn't use such a cheap thing in front of him. So more so, you're not going to do so when it comes to a service vessel in the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, that's a distinction when we say this one is made from the palm tree, from the palm fiber. It cannot be used as a kli sharis, but at the end, that mincha has to land up in a kli sharis before it could be offered. But again, this is a distinction showing what kind of, basically, again, here when we're dealing with the Sotah and the issue of her possible adultery and her going into seclusion with a man after being warned by the husband, things are clearly done in a less respectful, a more embarrassing or degrading way. Okay, next. Kol amenachas, all meal offerings, to unais shemen levina, they all need to be mixed with oil, and they all need, after they mix with oil, there's levina, which is a type of spice, I think they translate it as frankincense, is added to that mixture of the oil, of the flour and the oil. That's all menachas. Okay, kol amenachas bais menachitin. All now it doesn't say that, it doesn't speak it out in the Mishna, I believe, but the point is other menachas have oil and levina, and the mincha v'saita does not. Kol hamenachas bais menachitin. All meal offerings come from wheat. This one comes from barley. Wheat is a person food. Barley is an animal food. That's what's considered in the Mishnah. So clearly, the quality of the grain used for the flour for all menachas is higher than the one used for the Sotah. Again, because of the whole situation. Mincha omer. Now, the omer mincha. You know the omer, the omer which is brought on the second day of Pesach. And even though it comes from barley, keres, it comes from very finely ground barley flour. V'zuba kemach. While this one, meaning again by the mincha of the Sotah, comes from barley, but it's come from kemach. Kemach means coarse meal. That means all the stuff that lands up in mixed into it when you grind it, the chaff and all the other stuff. It's still there. It's very coarse. So again, we see here the difference between the mincha of the general mincha and the mincha of the Sotah. Rabbi Gamliel says, just like her behavior was the behavior of an animal, like an animal, her carbon, her sacrifice is also the food of an animal. When we say by making herself available to a man who is not her husband, she acted like an animal which does not attach itself to just one mate. And therefore, again, as part of the whole kind of theme of bringing out the degradation of these kinds of acts, this kind of behavior, it's brought out in the type of in the grain used for the carbon, her carbon, and we're using animal feed, animal type grain for that, again, to bring out what this behavior is comparable to. All right, so we had a number of distinctions mentioned in the Mishnah between a regular mincha and the mincha of the Sotah. So the first one was, all menachas need oil and levina and frankincense, right? Other than hers. That's not true. There is another type of mincha, referred to also as a minchas chayte, the mincha of a sinner, brought for certain types of sins, that also does not have oil and levina. So there's a little bit of a problem with the wording when it says all menachas need. All menachas don't need. Okay? Now, then it says all menachas come from wheat, and this one comes from barley. Minchas Omer also comes from barley, but it comes from finely ground. It's a little bit strange, it talks about all menachas, have wheat, are of wheat, and this one comes from barley, but there's another one that also comes from barley. The point should just be that, this is a fine, this is a coarse, hers is a coarse barley flour, and the regular ones is a very fine. You know how fine it is? It's fine enough that after it's ground into flour, it's sifted 13 times until the finest flour emerges, as brought down here in the notes. Okay? But let's get back. We still have to figure out, though, the wording of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is trying to make these distinctions, but there seems to be problems with the way the Mishnah is laying it out. So therefore, the Bartanura says like this. Now listen carefully. Okay? Most mincha offerings have three positive characteristics. A, they contain oil and levina. B, they are made of wheat. And C, their flour is fine. That is the general rule by most menachos. Then you have two mincha offerings, have two of these characteristics. The sinner's mincha, which we said before, this is not talking about the sotah, although lacking oil and levina, is made of wheat and its flour is fine. The omer offering, although made of barley rather than wheat, contains oil and levina and its flour is fine. The minchas kanois, which is the way the mincha of a sotah is referred to as a minchas kanois, the mincha of suspicion. Well, I want to see how they translate it for sure. Well, the same would say the mincha of either jealousy, the mincha of warning, right? Kinostira, you have to warn her. The mincha of warnings. That's how her mincha is referred to. Basically, hers has none of these qualities. It does not contain oil and levina. It is not made of wheat, and its flour is coarse. So the whole way you have to kind of read the Mishnah before is that all menachas have shemen and levina. Even if they don't have shemen and levina, they come from wheat. And if they're not coming from wheat, they're finely ground. Meaning somewhere they're going to have one of the qualities. But the mincha of the Sotah has none of the qualities. And again, that's all part of trying to show, it's all again trying to make it very, very, very obvious that the situation here is one of a very degrading nature. Have a wonderful day. That's how I did it.